Welcome back to Bread and Butter, everybody, where we're serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement in episode 58 with, as always, my co-host, Tito. Tito, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Doc. How are you about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. And special guest, Pylet, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
I'm going to call you out, Doc, because you just said about 10 seconds ago that you were okay, not good. So what changed in the last 10 seconds?
The recording button turned red.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
So, what have you been doing in Hearthstone recently, Pylet?
I have been trying to experiment with the new cards and trying not to tilt off the face of the planet with Druid and then other things that counter me when I try to counter the Druid. I played quite a bit of the Sludge Warlock until I ran into too many Plague DKs in a row and switched off that deck because that deck doesn't like things being shuffled and moving your sludges at all. But just testing some things, playing around with different things. I had a couple competitive matches over the weekend with THL and the Hype Horizon tournament, so tried to prep for those. And then after that, switched to Wild and Arena, just because I felt like doing something different. So when those were fun, I found a Menagerie Taunt Warrior in Wild that did okay with my low MMR. And Duel's Treasures in Arena are fun.
Heck yeah. How about yourself, Tito?
All right, my segment is what Doc's not Hearthstone segment is usually like. I got my notes here. So we had Ron Mexico on last week, and obviously he's a fantastic person to talk to. It was a great episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen to it because there's a lot of good information there. November and December and January, I've had the yips. I've still made Legend, but I've struggled. And I've been second guessing myself and all that. And it's been frustrating. Since I talked to Ron, I took off. I came into Legend a week or two ago, and I was about, I came in at like 8,500. And I took about 4,000 ranks off, just playing really well, playing confidently. It was a lot of fun. Then the mini set came. And my first day of the mini set, I held par. I did well. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I played about 500. I played a couple different things. It was fine. Then the next day, I started to just kind of experiment. I'm like, you know what? I got to start kind of, if I'm going to be a good player, I need to play with the new things and experiment. And I got stuck on a couple things. And when it's this time of the month, at least at my MMR, you move like 400 or 500 points every time you win or lose. And I lost quite a bit. So I ended up dropping quite a bit. And then I said, well, I guess I dropped far enough that who cares? I'm just going to keep playing. And my experiments with things like rock and roll taunt warrior and stuff didn't go as well as I had hoped. So I got a good suggestion from Donkey that said, hey, you should just play on other servers when you're trying to do things like that. And that was a good idea, except I'm not going to put any money into these other servers. And I went to Asia. I went to EU. And I have no stars on those. I have a very limited collection, but I built a paladin and a taunt druid. I think on aggro druid on both of them, a tree druid, and I did really well. In fact, on both servers, I have gotten 12 win streaks already, and I've pretty much run at a 90% clip. I've been winning like about 90% of my games. Now, that's not an accomplishment because technically I'm a legend player, and now I'm kind of smurfing on those accounts, so I should be playing at those levels when I'm bronze 10, 0 stars, playing against new people, whatever. But it's still very validating. And even though I had that slow streak the streak of since the mini set where I tried new things and I tanked my average and I tanked my rank, I still have about a 50% win rate at Legend. I was closer to 60%, but the fact that I'm still, winning or I have won has been really good. And it's been really enjoyable. So there's been a lot. I've been doing a lot all there. Oh, and by the way, I hit Legend for the first time in Wild, which I had 5 stars going into the month, and I was playing an even Plague Death Knight Highlander deck. And that was a lot of fun, but it was slow. And so I reached out to my buddy, Electric Sheep City, and said, "Hey, this is fun. It's a little slow." He said, "Here's the Shivala Paladin deck," and that deck was fun, consistent, good. And I got there. I played really well. I think I went at like a 70-something% win rate in the climb. It got a little slower as we got to like D5, but it felt really good there. And final bit of news, like I said, this is about going to be as long as when Doc talks about what he's been doing outside of Hearthstone. But I played Minty Fresh and I won. So Leo from the Hearthstone dev team, I was streaming and I was on mute because I had gone a step away to use the bathroom or something like that. And I forgot to unmute myself. But then Pylet reminded me, "Hey, you're on mute." But I was like, "Hey, I think I'm playing a dev." And it was. And he added me afterwards. And he came to my stream and said, "Hey, that was me." I'm like, "I know." And I had told him on Twitter that I was going to play some pure Paladin, which I ended up doing. But I ended up playing Earthen Paladin that night, and that was really fun too. So that was a lot of fun. Doc, what have you been doing in the world of Hearthstone?
Yeah, I've played just a couple BGs, because like Tito said, my outside of Hearthstone is usually pretty big and busy. And so I just played a couple BGs, trying to play Murlocs because I want Murlocs to be good for me, and got a couple top fours, which is good for not playing a lot of BGs recently. So I'll take top four when I can.
Now, speaking of outside of the game of Hearthstone, Doc, what happened last week when you weren't on the show, and how did I almost screw it up?
Yeah. So a funny thing, there was other developing circumstances with that, Tito. So what Tito's talking about is we were supposed to, or I was supposed to be on the episode with Ron Mexico on Saturday, but Cortland, my partner, and Daniel Stormard Sheldon had kind of arranged it to where her and I would go to a improv show he was doing down in Salt Lake City, which is about like 45 minutes for me. And he lives like 2 hours away, whatever. Like, he's my best friend. But
we know.
Just like, yeah, it's trademark TM. But the area of Utah that I live in, just like most of a lot of the country, got hit with severe winter storms. So Daniel and everybody were down in Salt Lake, but I live in a small enough city where the roads weren't plowed yet to get to the roads that were plowed. And so we ended up not going, and we lost power because it got too cold. And there was a main pipe that burst, and so we didn't have any water and no power for like 6 hours.
And all plow jokes, save for Blizzlet. But that sucks, dude. Burst pipes are never fun.
But this week, so Tito didn't necessarily ruin a surprise, because I don't think it was ruined, because neither Tito or I knew that this was going to happen, right? It was just coincidences, stars aligning, whatever you want to say. But this week, technically today is Cortland and I's anniversary, but we celebrated it yesterday. So that was a lot of fun. We hung out and got coffee in the morning, because we usually, our schedules, she gets up like 2 hours before I do. So we usually don't get to share mornings with each other because she works for the post office. But we got coffee, then we kind of hung out at home for a little bit, and then we went down and we went to Barnes & Noble, bought a couple books, then we went and had sushi and stuff, and that was really good. I bought 2 books. One is like 450 pages, and one's almost 500 pages, like 498, I think. I'm almost done with that one, because that's all I've been doing is reading this book from when we got home after dinner till like right before we started recording. It's Fourth Wing, if anyone's curious. It's popular on TikTok, but I'm a big Dragon Book fan because I love Christopher Paolini. And then we had family game night as well, and family made D&D characters, and I'm going to start running a D&D campaign for Cortland, her 2 brothers, and their sister-in-law.
I was hoping you were going to say her mom.
No. I love Cortland's mom though. She's great. But yeah, that's my life outside of Hearthstone. How about yourself, Pylet?
Yeah, just getting back into the swing of things for the new semester at school. Not that it changes too much for me because I teach elementary, but trying to get the kids going again after winter break, and then only going to school 2 days last week because we also had weather and cold, and probably will have more tonight because there's an ice storm coming in. Means that there's no consistency, and it's going to be crazy pretty much this whole month. I've just accepted it at this point. But other than that, not too much. Just trying to keep on track of work things, trying to play a couple other games here and there. Some things just on Switch, Xbox, things like that. But probably talk about that
nice
a little bit more later, and nothing too much that stood out. What about you, Tito?
Oh, look at him, expert podcaster. Well, we had my parents over this weekend. We had my grandkid over this weekend too. He had overnight, and then we had my parents come over yesterday. Today is Monday. Yeah, yesterday. And we finally got Christmas over. They were supposed to come up the last weekend of the year because they were on vacation at Christmas. They were down in Aruba, I think. Somewhere there was warm, but while they were there, they had drama getting home with issues with planes and airports and all that. But then they also got COVID, so we pushed that out for a while, and they finally came up this weekend, which was nice. And we're just getting over a minor cold snap, and we're still having an ice storm or bad weather coming on tomorrow, so there might not be school for the kids on Wednesday. This is the podcast weather report coming at you. But and when I say a cold snap, it's a minor cold snap. It's like we're not dealing with like 4 degrees, 3 degrees, sub-zero, but it's been colder than it has been, so it's not too bad. But anyway, my life outside of Hearthstone has been uneventful, clearly because I've been playing way too much Hearthstone. But I don't think a lot of people, like, we've had a lot of guests on that a lot of people know. I don't think a lot of people know who Pylet is, so why don't we get to know him a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So Pylet, what started like your video game journey, and how did you find Hearthstone?
So I grew up playing video games. My family, my brothers, I distinctly remember we had a Super Nintendo and a PlayStation 1 growing up that we would play endlessly on weekends. There were a lot of Saturday and Sunday mornings spent playing, couch co-op games for the Super Nintendo. For a while, I wasn't convinced it was a real game because I could never find it anywhere else. But we had a Goof Troop, or as Goofy and Max, that we played constantly. That was the most fun. And then it was a real game because then I found it, like an emulator for it later on. I'm like, hey, this does still exist. So grew up with those, played a lot of different things. Grew up playing a lot of Pokemon, a lot of turn-based things, some Zelda. And then I did not get into Hearthstone until COVID shutdowns. That was kind of my hobby that I picked up. And I actually got to it from Overwatch because one of the Overwatch streamers I would watch, Fitzy here, would sometimes dabble in Battlegrounds. And that led me to watching Slissa a little bit, as well as Dexter, and kind of pulled me into Hearthstone. I'm like, oh, this looks fun. I played a little bit of card games growing up. My brothers and I had Yu-Gi-Oh cards and Pokemon cards. So we'd play a little bit, mainly just casually, whatever we had to throw together and play against each other or some of our friends. Started out free to play, played a lot of Battlegrounds to start to build up gold and get a collection. And then once I figured out, I'm going to play this game for a while, started trying to build more decks and find out meta stuff, and got much more involved, and now have been playing it since.
And to be clear, he is a 11-star legend player most months, so he ramped up quick.
Yeah, part of that I don't want to say lucky. Lucky in the sense that one of the early decks that spoke to me was probably the best deck at the time. So I started during Ashes, and then Was it Skola wasn't that year. Was Scholomance Academy that year? I think it was.
I think it was, yeah.
So my new player deck that I picked up was Galakron Rogue, which I didn't know at the time was really good, but that was a really good deck. Turns out when you get 4 good cards that cost 0, you can win Hearthstone games. So I started in April of that year. I think my first legend was around September or October of the same year. So I ramped up fairly quickly, and then I've maintained legend ever since. And then the past year, I've hit 11x 5 or 6 times. So fallen off of that a little bit lately.
That's more than my 1.
So is it true that you're an expert at Fall Guys? And when are you trying out for Fall Guys esports?
It is not true. And that was fully a fluke and fully luck at Squelch Patron Night or whatever it was that we were playing. And I happened to make the finals like 3 games in a row because that was the first time I had played in probably 2 years. I actually played a practice game to remember the controls before we started that night. And got really lucky that I was able to hang in there and whatnot. But no, there are no pro aspirations there.
Darn. So currently, outside of Hearthstone, what games do you play now?
My other quote unquote main game is probably Overwatch. I play a decent bit of Overwatch. So fell off of it for a while at the end of Overwatch 1, which I think a lot of people did after 2 or 3 years of no content. Got back into it. Struggled at the beginning because I mainly played tank, and learning going from 2 tanks, especially as mainly an off-tank player, to then being the only tank was very challenging. But have gotten back into it. I think the game's going in a really good direction. Played little bit of variety. Other than that, I enjoy racing games. Play some Forza, both Horizon and the Motorsport one. Still Zelda, still some Pokemon. And then I've actually gotten into lately trying to go through a lot of the older Nintendo games, because through the Nintendo Switch Online, they have the retro virtual consoles. So I've tried picking some of the best games and playing some of those, just games that I missed when I was younger or came out before me being into games.
Now I'm kind of wishing that you would have said that you got into Hearthstone because you were listening to a F1 podcast on Squelch that then threw you into.
See, I worked my way. We've talked about this before, I think, Tito. I worked my way backwards through Hearthstone podcasts because I actually started with Vicious Syndicate because Dexter would recap the weekly reports. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll listen to that. And that pulled me into Coin Concede because of Hat hosting both, which then pulled me into Squelch, and then pulled me into all these other, more casual podcasts rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's definitely not the normal way to navigate the Hearthstone podcasting space. That's really funny. So what is your favorite Hearthstone class?
Probably Mage or Rogue. Those are the 2 that I was most drawn to. Mage because any game where you get to pick a spellcasting class I've just been pulled into. Same with Rogue and some of the shenanigan sides of Rogue, but definitely a toss-up between those 2, although Shaman's gotten pretty close the past year or so also.
Okay, so if Rogue, Mage, or Shaman could be your favorite class, or what is your favorite deck, and is it one of those classes?
It is. So I am not someone to stick with a deck for a long time. I just get bored sticking with one deck, and I bounce around. I can see Tito shaking his head because he knows that I bounce around to too many decks. Mainly because I send them to him, and they go much worse for him. But that Galakron Rogue is still one of my favorite ones. Although I did have a Miracle Rogue that I built in Barrens, specifically meant to win the mirror because I had more minions, and that was a lot of fun.
Nice. So what are your long-term and short-term goals this year for Hearthstone?
I think short-term is to continue building my deck variety. I definitely was mainly an aggro and mid-range type of player my first few years, probably leaning more towards mid-range styles. I didn't like full-out aggro because I didn't like the feeling of I have to win by turn 5 or I'm out of cards. So I liked decks that had a little bit of longevity, a little bit of decision-making, but definitely some from-hand stuff as well. But I've started to pick up a little bit more combo this year because I really enjoyed the Rainbow Mage, Nature Shaman, but control is way over my head. And it's definitely a type of deck I need to figure out if I want to kind of maintain my long-term goal of kind of maintaining a rank kind of bracket to where I feel like I swing too much. I've started keeping track of just some basic stats the past couple years for myself and seeing when do I hit 11x, what's my highest rank, what's my finishing rank, what's my win rate. And I have too many times where I'll have 11x and then the next month I barely make it, and then the following month I finish at like 8,000 because something went wrong. And I just want to eliminate that, and I think being more versed in different decks will help me adjust to the meta and adjust to what I'm seeing a little bit more.
You said something interesting there. Mid-range, what is that?
So I think it's a 4-letter word from what I've been told, but I like aggro decks. I like just throwing minions and damage face, but I don't like decks that if you don't win in so many turns, then you just don't have anything to do. So like current Paladin decks are fine for me. They're aggressive, but you have a top end, you have Countess, you have some late game that you can build on compared to like when I started playing Face Hunter, where Hunter didn't have draw those first year or two that I played. They just didn't. They didn't print draw for Hunter. And it's like, well, I guess I'll play this card I top decked and hero power and hope I win next turn. Oh, they healed. I'm done.
Nice. Funny that you said that, the draw. So I'm talking to Pylet over the weekend, and with the new Highlander warrior deck, you get the brand down, and you have so many things that give you draw or generation in that deck. I said to him, I feel like there's a problem. I think we need to thin out the draw because I always have a full hand. And he's like, do you realize that 3 years ago or 2 years ago, the fact that you would say warrior has too much draw would have given you like sideways looks.
Yeah. So what is it? This doesn't have to be something crazy, but what is something that you think people would find surprising to learn about yourself?
These are always the questions I'm awful at. Like, you know, those icebreakers that you have to do, and they're like, oh, do 2 truths and a lie. As much as I do those as a teacher, especially like teaching band and marching band, we do stuff to build team building and stuff at the beginning of the year. I'm so bad at actually participating in them, though. So I looked at this question. I actually have thought about it for like the past 2 hours and still. So probably, and this is mainly like online people wouldn't know this much, but people who know me in real life, especially knowing like that I'm into music, I teach music, I'm into gaming, but sports is really up there for me. Also, I played too many sports growing up, as pretty much anything that I could be involved in elementary. I did that. I did 4 different sports through high school, to where through school I golfed and ran track, and then outside of school I played in some rec soccer leagues and then a bowling league. And every time I say that to especially students, they're like, you were an athlete, you did stuff. It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm the same. I was a varsity athlete. I did cross country, track, and yeah, no one expects it.
Yeah, well, since we're talking about high school sports, I did wrestling, football, cross country, and track.
Very nice. Yeah. All former runners
here. Yeah, there was one wrestling practice we would have every year. Sorry, this is just a random doc fact. So in my wrestling program, there was one practice we'd have every year. It was the practice we'd get assigned our singlets, and if you had school issue headgear, then it would be where you'd get your headgear. But we would do how many sit-ups and how many push-ups you could do to failure after like warm-ups, and that was the entire practice because it was just to see how much you could push yourself. So my school had what was called the 1000 sit-up club, and you can't take a break. Like once you stop, you're done. Coaches move you on to the next portion, and then whatever. I had never made the 1000 sit-up club throughout all of high school till my senior year. In my senior year, I was so bound and determined that I ended up doing 1,503 sit-ups before my coaches made me stop because we had a tournament the next day. So then they made the 1,500 sit-up club, and it just says Doc. Well, not actually Doc. It says my real name, but I'm the only one on there. So that was pretty. It sucked. It definitely does not feel good the next couple days after you do that many.
No, and I used to be in a club that did that too. It was called the Army. But so actually, funny story though. I used to do gymnastics for fun because I took a couple classes in college, and there's nothing more fun than doing a back tuck drunk to make money. But I mean, I used to do, round off back handspring tucks and all kinds of stuff. But part of that was doing a lot of sit-ups. And one day, I used to just go to open gym, and we were doing this thing where we were on what's called a tumble track, which is like just kind of like a long trampoline, and there was a squishy mat at the end. And every time we didn't completely just stick the landing, we had to do so many sit-ups. And I did over 1,000, not at once, but it was like 50 each time or whatever like that. And the next day I was fine. Not a problem. The day after, I had to work two jobs. Actually, I think I had to work 3 jobs. I think I had to get up in the morning because I worked for RGIS, which was the inventory people that used to come in with the calculators on their side. I had
good old Regis.
I had a supermarket in the morning. Then I had my day shift at Newport Creamery, which is like a Friendly's. And then I had an evening at like a Staples with Regis. So I had a full long day. 2 days after doing all those sit-ups, I woke up. I had to roll out of bed because I just could not move.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, I think we've gone off a little tangent. Let's get back to the interview, Doc.
Yeah. So, Pylet, you started a podcast with Tito called The Rumble Report. But that's kind of fallen by the wayside based on how often you and Tito play Warcraft Rumble still. Have you ever thought about doing another podcast on any particular topic?
Yeah, we were actually talking about this, I think, before you got here, where I actually picked Rumble back up with the new season starting yesterday. So, and found a build that I liked, which makes the game a lot more enjoyable. I struggled getting into it and then just got busy with other stuff because, like I mentioned, I'm into music, and we tried starting it in November, I think it was. And December is insane because I have 0 free time in life. And then once I do, I sleep. And that's it for like the last month of December because I need it. But I have thought about it a little bit. So I'm not in a spot where it's easy for me to jump into like content creating just because of my job and my schedule. I have so many evening rehearsals. Yeah. So I live in tiny town with awful internet, so streaming isn't really an option for me. So it's something that I've thought about. It's something that definitely interests me because of just how I think being a teacher, and I think that's something I could do, but it's not something that I have time to do at this point, or haven't made time for, I guess, yet.
Okay. So what is the Pylet program?
So the Pylet program is all the really bad decks that I try that I sent to Tito to try first and find out if they're going to win or not. No, it was, I think he started the name for this because, like I mentioned, I enjoy playing a lot of different decks, and I'm more drawn to off-meta decks typically. I've always found myself a lot more at home playing something that's a solid tier 2 deck that I can learn and find edges into the matchups rather than playing the top deck and being targeted. I don't like that. I'd much rather play something tier 2 something 50-50 that has a chance in pretty much everything, because then I feel like what I'm doing makes a difference in the games and if I'm winning those games. Sometimes that ventures a little farther away from that, though, and we get into some really interesting lists. So I don't build a ton of decks. I'm more comfortable kind of finding an idea and then, let's take that out, let's put that in, tweaking it in that way. I've tried building a couple decks. Most of them don't work out very well, other than ones off of established ideas. But yeah, normally Tito ends up getting those and sees the results after I've already given up on it. I play like 3 games. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. And then he's like, I'm 0-10. What did you send me? I'm like, you should have quit 7 games ago like I did. That's your fault.
And once in a while it flips the other way. Once in a while, like you're like, hey, I won 2 games, and then you're like, oh, now I've lost 5 games in a row, and I'm like 7-3. But maybe I didn't have the yips. Maybe I just played too many Pylet decks.
Probably.
So where did you get your name from?
So I don't remember what it was for. It was for whatever online thing I needed to come up with a screen name for at first. And I absolutely no idea what to use. And I'm pretty sure I just randomly hit 2 letters on the keyboard and it went from there. So P and Y were the first 2 that came out. I'm like, oh, sure, let's finish this with Pylet. And then that's been my name ever since. A lot of times I add the 712 at the end, especially if the name's taken, to where it's my birthday. So it's something that I'll know and remember. And normally people aren't going randomly up to the 700s for no reason. So it's worked for me, and it's hasn't changed since.
Hey, you also have a username that's Pylet with your social security number afterwards. Can you tell us what that one was again? All right. Well, our topic today for discussion is adjusting to the meta after there's a big change. Now, sometimes you get a little minor patch where they give you, they adjust some outliers and they try to bring the meta in line and nothing really changes. Maybe a deck that was 60% gets brought down to 55%. But then sometimes you have things like new rotation, which is a big one. You have mini sets, which we're going to talk about a little bit. Or you have like a major patch where they buff a bunch of things, which usually don't matter when they buff things. Every once in a while it does, like Velorok. But sometimes they just, they change a lot. And so you have stale metas that some people like, some people don't like, right? So once a meta is stale, stale might be not the wrong word, but it's a word that people use. It's solved. It's there. That the good decks are Rogue and Druid, because Druid's always good. And that either Shaman is great or it sucks, depending on what cards they have. So these things, when you have a solved meta, it's easier to say, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to play the good decks? Or do I want to play something that beats the good decks? Or if I want to build something, there's still room for development in a stale meta because it's so defined that you can say, well, where can I squeeze something in here? Would this make sense? And it gives you more stability to build something or to try to change something. And when a meta is fresh, things are constantly shifting. Like we just got a mini set on Thursday, and what's good, like you can go to bed tomorrow, like you could play all day, be like, oh, I had an awesome time playing this whatever deck, this warrior deck, and then I can't wait to play tomorrow. I'm just going to clean up. And then the meta shifted because people are like, everyone else is playing that warrior, and they found an easy way to counter it. So then everyone's farming the warrior, and now this is a meta tyrant. So whatever that one is, somebody else playing. And then so that kind of keeps shifting and moving until we kind of come to the whatever rock, paper, scissors meta we end up with afterwards. A good example would be, we'll get to that later actually, so I'll follow about that. So question for the group. Which metas do you like better? Do you like solved metas or do you like fresh metas, or do you like both? Pylet, why don't you start off?
I think I slightly prefer solved metas. I struggle a bit more in fresh metas, especially just finding footing and finding something that I enjoy, and then I do. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I found that Sludge Warlock. I really enjoyed it. And then I got caught in the crossfire of Plague DKs trying to target Druid, and it just stopped working because I ran into too many of them. Solved metas fit my playstyle a bit more, where I can find that, okay to good deck, learn it, get those couple extra percentage points, or no, okay, I'm going to see this a lot. Let's play this, and this, because I can beat up on those decks and the ones trying to counter it. So probably slightly solved, but trying to find other stuff so I don't get bored.
Doc, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I kind of like the first 2 to 3 days of a new meta, like when a new full set drops. Because unless it's like a 3-set meta and it's the first mini sets aren't necessarily the most impactful thing right away. So first 2-3 days of a brand new set coming out, I think is just so much fun because you can play some bonker stuff that will never ever work again just because everyone's trying to do something crazy. Or you can be a little demon and just play like Zulok, and then Zulok just forever was always good, and you would just farm a bunch of wins early on in new expansions. But overall, I do prefer more solved metas just because it makes it easy for me to find out what I want to play. I look at the meta reports, see what's winning, see what classes that I like to play, see how they're doing, and then I just pick the best deck of 3 classes I like to play, and then I just jam those until I get bored of those and find something else.
I had you pegged for a fresh meta guy. I really did. I thought you were gonna be I love the chaos. I love, and more than just 2 days. You know what? I never know what I want to play. So if it's that, so that was I had you pegged wrong, Doc.
Well, so because nowadays a meta only stays unsolved for just maybe 2-3 days, maybe, because we get so much early content now with having people get early access and streaming. So there's already people doing all these deck building ideas, and so when it actually drops, there's already these ideas that have been getting more refined over a couple games over the course of that weekend that they do all the pre-show stuff for. And then it's just not as long as it used to be before they started doing that. Because before, it felt like the first week maybe was kind of just guns blazing, getting to do whatever you want to do. And then now it's okay, you get maybe 2-3 days, and then you kind of have to start falling in line unless you want to start losing some MMR.
I push back on that a little bit. I think you get a good couple weeks where it's not maybe complete. I think things evolve, and then you start to feel hey, how many times have we seen something that happened? Okay, here's the release or here's the patch, and it's everyone kind of saying, okay, we got this, we know a patch is coming, and then 2 days before the patch comes out, oh, here's Fire Druid, oh, here's this, oh, here's that. I feel that we still get stuff as you go that does shift the meta a little bit, and but I mean, it still solves quicker now. That's been always one of my complaints is when you do have the theory crafting streams, it does kind of gives people an advantage because now they obviously you don't see the full decks because they have to use 10 cards from the new sets or whatever like that, but people can then start to refine in the 4 or 5 days after that before we get the patch. So yeah, I can agree with that, but I think it's more than 2 or 3 days. It's been 5 days now and we're still kind of settling down. So I don't know, but for me, I love stale metas because if you've ever seen my streams or whatever, I have no problem playing the same deck for 800-900 games, more, whatever. I get a deck and I will pound it into the ground. Because I feel I learn a lot more that way. When you bounce from deck, for me personally, when I bounce from deck to deck to deck, there's stuff to learn there. But I like learning the matchups, and I like learning, hey, this is how I can do this, and this is. I love not even have to look. I love when I know a deck so well. I don't care about the mulligan guide. I already know my plays. I know, hey, these are my options coming up. So I love that. And I struggle in a new meta. And when I struggle, I get frustrated. So for me, as I'm trying to become a better Hearthstone player, I hit these new metas, and I just get so frustrated because I'm I don't know what to play, and I don't want to just be the guy that keeps jamming the same thing. Sometimes I will, but when you just jam the same thing, you don't evolve too. So I I like a solved meta, but I'm also the person that's like, people are with World of Warcraft. People are like, oh, I can't wait for the new expansion. I can't wait for the new expansion. Where I'm like, I'm still farming the zone. I use the mod, all the things, and I'm only 87% with this zone and 98% with this one, and I want to do this and I want to do that. I want to do all the things. So I'm never anxious to get the new thing. I'm usually just like, hey, let me finish this here. Let's not. Why we got to rush that? So. I love new cards. I love when the meta changes, but I don't like that transition, so, but now the meta changes are, whether you like them stale or fresh, it's going to happen regardless, right? These things happen, and they happen more frequently since they've kind of changed their cadence. Although some people would say, wow, we've had a month of Valrock. What the heck? So they even stealth nerfed him by a mistake a couple days ago because when they put out the mini set, he reverted back to what he was, even though the card text was different, which was nice. But they fixed it, and Hat had to tell everybody. I'm mad at Hat for that. But so when the meta changes, how do you approach it? So we talked a little bit, but like Pylet, when it's out, when you get the new meta, what is your approach to the new meta?
So for me, I really like going to on HS Replay. I typically don't look at their straight up tier list. A lot of times I go over to the matchups, and then they have an option to sort by estimated win rate, and it ranks it based on its matchups and the popularity of those matchups. And that's where I normally find the decks that I really enjoy, because I can find something that nobody's playing, but it beats this, and this. So that's normally how I like to approach it, just because I don't like being that top targeted deck. I want to find something that will work for it. And that normally gets me at least in a decent spot, to where the other week, just before the mini set, I pulled Cleave Hunter back out, just because even though it was nerfed, and you felt the nerf with ABJ, because that 1 mana definitely made a difference in the combo turn, and not being able to tutor it anymore is what hurt the most. A lot of boards went wide, so you just built up a big cleave and then killed them. And it's like, oh, I can target them with this. So that's kind of normally where I jump to first. Every now and then I'll pull out an old deck and say, oh, maybe this works again. Normally it's something to where I've really enjoyed, and I'm stubbornly not letting it go, like Naga Mage. Because, man, I love that deck, and I was so upset when they nerfed it, because I just learned it, and it was set to be the top deck, and I was so excited, and then it just died. But sometimes I'll pull those out. Normally, I kind of let them go just because they don't come back quite as strong. Sometimes they do, but it seems like you always feel it, unless they got some injection in new cards. But what about you, Doc?
I usually just go on to HS Replay and just find the thing with the best win rate. If it's a class I enjoy. Basically, I just look for like Paladin, Hunter, or Druid, and then play the best deck that those classes have to offer. And then if I don't like that specific deck, I'll, like, if there's a different archetype, then I'll go and look at the different archetypes. But yeah, for the longest time, I was mainly playing aggro Paladin and aggro Druid, because those were just so good for so long over so many different metas that I didn't really super bother to learn any of the other decks. But yeah, I just find classes I like and just pick a deck or two from there.
I have to change the way I handle this, and that's part of why I was thinking about this, because I talked about this a little bit up top, but when the meta changes, sometimes I latch onto a deck that is really good, and maybe it goes south like the next day or two, but if I find a deck that's really good, I'm happy, it's fine. But more often than not, I struggle to find that deck. Like sometimes even at the beginning of a month or a new, like I struggle to find the deck that clicks with me, and instead of taking a break and or finding something different or shifting, I begrudgingly stick with something and say, no, I'm going to figure this out. This deck is good. There's something here. And then I look up and I've just given back 5,000 ranks. And I'm like, well, I guess I've thrown away this month. And this happens more often than I'd like to admit, which, well, actually, I admit it because that's my job here, is to tell you guys about these things. But it happens more than enough that I need to kind of change my approach here. So, that's part of why I'm building up a collection and some ranks on a new server on the European and Asia. So that way I can do that over there and try the new things and not necessarily blow apart what I've just spent the last 3 weeks working on trying to improve things. So we'll see how that goes. It's new for me, but I'm excited to see. But so we talked about this a little bit. So Pylet, you said you like to look at the matchups, but in general, do you think you like to target the front runners that have emerged over the first couple of days, or do you like to try to counter them? Or do you try to take stuff that you were already playing and adapt it with new cards and move forward?
Lately, I've been much more about countering or adapting, unless those front runners are clearly a type of deck that I know that I would enjoy. If it's a play style or a class or archetype that I know I really enjoy and want to play that, then I'll switch to it and just take whatever comes with it if it gets targeted. But unless it's that, then I'm not going to completely switch what I'm doing just to jump on because, Control Priest is the top deck, is clearly the top deck. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no interest in playing Control Priest right now. I'll find something else to do and go with whatever comes with that personally.
But if you played Control Priest, you're not going to lose that many ranks, even if you lose, because every game takes an hour and a half.
Oh, where there's a will away, where I will find a way to still tank.
All right, Doc, how about yourself? Which decks do you like to pick up when the meta changes?
Yeah, so whenever there's like a new hotness, if it's aggro or like aggro adjacent, I'll definitely look if I can build it in my collection. If it's combo or if it's a priest deck, I won't touch it. Just because the only two priest decks I ever enjoyed playing was OG Big Priest when One Night in Karazhan came out, and old Dragon Priest. Those are the two priest decks I enjoyed. Wish either style of priest that those existed would come back, just because I really, really enjoyed those and it made me like the class. But yeah, as long as there's something that's aggro or like mid range that's doing pretty decent, I'll hop on that. If it's something like Odin Warrior, I'll try to learn it. I won't learn it well. But I enjoyed trying to learn Odin Warrior. It was a fun deck when that was the big hotness.
Big Priest, huh? Greetings, fellow humans.
yeah. Old Big Priest was my jam. When I played in DreamHack Denver, that was one of the decks I brought.
Very nice, very nice. And by the way, I meant to mention this earlier. We are not sponsored by HS Replay, but we're open to it. So, Andrew, if you're out there, just let us know, and we'll promote you even harder. But I don't know how I approach these. Like, I think I do it differently every time, and I think that's part of my issue. Is sometimes I want to just keep jamming what I'm jamming. I'm like, oh, maybe if I add these two cards or whatever, I can keep doing it, but clearly it's not the right idea. And sometimes I'm like, well, let's try this new deck. Everyone seems to be like, I can't tell you how many times I've picked up a deck that's like a 60% win rate, and I just either run into every bad matchup or I just can't figure out how to pilot it, because it is just, I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be winning 60% of my games, but I'm winning like 30% of my games. So what's happening? So, again, I'm probably going to try different things on different servers, but, I don't know. It's a hard thing. But I think let's get into the next part of this, which is, for some people, rank doesn't matter, right? If you hit a rank floor, who cares at that point, right? Unless you're keeping track, unless you're very concerned about your, statistics at that point, it doesn't really matter. You hit D5, you hit D1, you hit, Plat 10, whatever it might be. Once you hit that rank floor, screw around with whatever the heck you want. That used to be one of my favorite things to do, is like, all right, fine, I finally made D5. Let's go ahead and get weird, right? So that's like a perfect opportunity. But once you hit the legend, it's like, well, do you care or not? Some people don't care. They're like, legend, I hit legend. Who cares? So, and that's what I used to do before when I hit legend, is I just play whatever I wanted to. I didn't want to engage in the meta, because then I would know if I was a good player or a bad player, because it was like, well, I didn't try hard. I was like, oh, I finally got there, so let's just do whatever. But if you care about your rank, how do you approach this? And I'm going to say, if you really care about your rank, the first thing you probably should do is just wait. If it's that important to you, unless one of the top meta decks is something that's similar to your play style or a deck you play, maybe chill. Maybe, again, play on a different server, figure things out. But, we're not all Pocket Train or Meaty or Gabby or whoever that can just take whatever and take a pile of cards and win, right? Sometimes you got to learn how the strategies and how they work. So those are some options. Just wait or try a different server. Any other thoughts on how to play in a new meta? And maybe if you're concerned about your rank, how would you approach it? Pylet?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the person. I started out being the type of player to where I hit legend, and now let's go find every off-meta weird deck that I can play and just go and play it. And then I had a couple months where I was able to push a little bit higher, and either because that off-meta deck was really good and it wasn't off-meta, it was just a good deck, or some of the top decks intrigued me and I played them a lot, and I just pulled up some of those stats, and I had, a couple years ago where I had a stretch where I went from finishing in the 9,000s to then jumping up to the 4,000s. I think that's when I started to decide, let's see what I can do, and then promptly finish the next month at 13,000. I think that was Nathria release, because that was an awful month for me, but I bounced back and hit my first 11x a few months later. And I'm like, yeah, let's see what I can do. Let's play good decks. Let's actually think about the meta. And that's something that then intrigued me. Now, when it's a new meta, I try to ignore the number. And I know everyone says ignore the number and you'll play better. And sometimes you can do that and sometimes you can't. It depends on where you're at in the game and outside of the game. Where if I'm having a generally easy time of the school year, I can ignore that and just play and have fun. If I'm frustrated outside and then I just keep losing, you feel it. And then it's like, I don't care. I'm just going to switch to this deck. I'm going to hit face and I'm going to win no matter what it takes. And that's normally when you need to step away. But it's a lot easier to ignore when you're in that mindset of, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to focus on this. Or I just want to play the game. That's why I switched to Wild the other day, because I'm like, I need something where I don't have to care, because I'm losing too much in standard and it's frustrating me to lose. Let's go do something else. So that's kind of my thoughts and approach to it. I'm not in a spot where I can maintain a new meta super well, especially learning decks. I've gotten better at picking up decks faster, but then typically get knocked down like the second 20 games and figure out I don't actually know what I'm doing with it yet. But that's part of my approach to it, at least.
And sometimes, like, I do the same thing where, like we just mentioned, like, I will just say, I'm not going to worry about my rank. And then I look at my rank after, 2 hours. And then I'm like, wait a second, I actually do care about my rank. What am I doing? Why did I do that? Past Jay, I'm mad at you. So,
yep.
What can you do? How about yourself, Doc?
Yeah, so sometimes I just like to be a goblin and just play what was good in the previous meta if the new meta is not solved yet. And because you can steal so many wins that way. Yes, people will try to anger at you and send you some wonderful messages. But sometimes you just gotta get a win when you can get a win, and playing something that is still good because it has been refined is okay too, even if it's generally looked down upon.
Oh, there's been times when I've done that where it's just been, I know the meta changes. I know this is going to be really good. I'm just going to keep jamming it because everyone else is going to be trying to learn new things. And I had no shame. It's fine. You play what you want to play. If you could I just wanted to get to a place and then I would try something new. So yeah, whatever. It's your card game. It's your time. If people aren't happy with it, that's, their own thing. They can figure that out. All right. So
I feel like Tito did a lot of talking around this segment of trying to not say that he's a Pally main. Like I've been trying to convince him he is for the past 2 months, because that's what he keeps coming back to. He's talked around it very, very well this entire segment.
He did it with Shadow Priest too.
About a year ago, right? Whenever Shadow Priest first started. So and that's what the Shadow Priest was probably my best. But honestly, and Pylet's he's in my stream a lot. I think that up until Thursday, when the miniset came out. I think the last couple weeks before that, I have been playing probably some of the best, at least the week before that, I think I've been playing some of the best Hearthstone I think I've ever played. And a lot of, as of Pally, because I've been consistent, I've been playing the deck and I enjoy it. I don't know if I'm considering myself a Pally main. I'm currently a Pally main, but I don't think I'm a Pally main full time. I'm kind of I don't have a main. I just, whatever is something I enjoy, I will latch onto and play for a million games. And then when I find something else that I really enjoy, I'll stick with that for a million games. And every once in a while, we'll dive back into something. But speaking of Paladin and other things, so we have a new meta, and on day one, it looked like Ramp Druid and Highlander Warrior were going to be the thing, right? They were top. You couldn't play. If you played 10 games, you probably saw 8 to 10 Druid or Warriors. And that's probably because you were also playing it, so that you never really got away from it. But those decks just dominated. They were everywhere. Now that we've gotten some statistics, they seem to be aggregating out to be about tier 3 decks, which, still good and playable, but they're not the meta tyrants everyone was expecting them to be. But it's only been, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's only been 5 or 6 days, right? So that doesn't mean that they're not still good decks. Right now, how they've been built maybe is not refined. So they were the hotness, and now they're okay. People are still playing them because they're a lot of fun. I mean, who doesn't love playing Bran? By the way, we did that hype tournament this weekend. I also did it. I lost my first round matchup because I could not find Bran, because yes, there is a penalty for playing Highlander decks. Sometimes you don't get the cards you want, and when your opponent gets their Bran and you don't, and if they get their Doc Holiday on turn 4 and you still can't find your stuff, you're gonna lose. But anyway, that was fun. But like, these things will keep changing, right? So you don't have to overlook these decks. Don't panic because day one they're super dominating, because you just they're gonna things are gonna settle down, and that doesn't mean that day one Demon Hunter isn't gonna need a nerf, or day one we find out, hey, this particular card is really, really strong, Velrock, and that they need to change it, Velrock. But these things happen. But for the most part, don't panic on day one when something looks crazy if you hate it, because it'll shift. People will find counters, and then it'll probably come back to earth. Wait till we get some aggregate statistics, because math doesn't lie. And you can usually see, hey, this card, like Ticketus, everyone loved playing Ticketus, but it wasn't a good deck. And that's where they say it's a good design space, right? But when you play Ticketus, it felt like every single time you played against a Ticketus Warlock, you lost. You didn't, but it felt that way because you always remember the times where they burned your combo pieces or whatever it is, right? So don't panic when you see these things on the first couple days. It'll settle down. So right now, the meta is looking like we have some new decks. Aggro DH is kind of coming back. It looks like it's one of the top tier 1 or tier 2, depending on the meta you're looking at. I think it's tier 1 at top legend and legend, and then it's like tier 2 from like diamond below. Arcane Hunter is back. I haven't seen a ton of it myself, but it's back out there, and they've got some tools. So I know everyone was saying that Hunter really got nothing in the mini set, but apparently they're doing all right. And again, this will all shift. This is where we are just a few days later. Some of the decks that existed have gotten some tools and are better. Sludge Lock got some tools. I think it's a much better deck. I'm enjoying playing it. It's one of the decks I'm winning with, so we're going to stick with that. Aggro and Pure Paladin both got better. Kind of crazy when you let a buff class have Wind Fury. I'm not complaining. It's a lot of fun.
That's losing a bunch of its buff cards, though, at rotation, isn't it?
You shut your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
All right.
No. I think we lose Garden's Grace, right?
Okay.
And
all those holy spells are Sunken City. Garden's Grace for Kel'Thalas. So that might be okay to stick around for a little bit.
Well, then we just
and
become
then disappear.
Then we just become Kangor or Earthen Mains. That's fine. But outside of that, so Treant Druid, still good, very good, and they picked up a new card. Playing a 6/8 on turn 4 ain't bad. That's that one that it's the Druid Warlock card that when you play it, you have to choose one to either discard 2 cards or delete a mana crystal. If you forge it, you don't have that penalty. That card goes really well when you're trying to be an aggressive deck. It also goes really well in the Sludge Lock because, well, even though it never discards sludges for me, it has the potential to do it. Plague DH is really competitive and well right now because it's countering some of the things that people are trying to do in the meta. Again, if people are playing Highlander Warrior, well, guess what? Turns off Highlander Warrior. Plagues. You're trying to jam all those sludges at the bottom of your deck. Guess what? Shuffling your deck kind of disrupts that plan. So people like playing Plague DH even when it's not good, and now it's good. So, and this again will all shift. It'll all change. As we said last week, these things all dependent upon each other, and as things change, whatever. Now, Excavation Rogue, and I'm calling it Excavation Rogue again because Nick Deck Tech said that we have been labeling it everything but what it's actually called, which is Excavation Rogue. We call it Mining Rogue, we call it Drilling Rogue, but they actually give us a word for it, Excavation. So I got you, Deck Tech. Excavation Rogue is still really good. We had a couple days after, like we said, after the mini set dropped where Velrock was broken. They fixed it fairly quickly, and that was actually kind of nice because it gave some other people kind of just keep jamming that deck and win, so it gave some opportunities for other decks to emerge. But guess what? Now that it's fixed, it's still a really good deck, and it's fun, and it's one of those things like that just generates stuff, and it's fun, and you never know what's going to happen, and that appeals to a lot of folks where it's like, how am I going to win this time? Or what? Oh, I generated a Pyroblast. Or, hey, I missed my Drilly, but then I got a Drilly off the guy that draws more quick draw cards. There's always kind of fun things to happen. And when you can get a Velrock on turn 3, it's almost game over. So, any thoughts on the meta right now, guys? I think it's interesting. I like watching it develop, and I think that sometimes with the mini sets, we don't see new archetypes evolve. Like we get excited and say these cards are going to be great, and then the meta maybe doesn't change. Maybe we get one new deck, but this one seems to have really mixed things up. So, Pylet, what are your thoughts on the meta currently and the new set?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it falls into place, especially stats wise, as some of these decks settle in. Because, like, looking at the tier list, you have a lot of archetypes that are, in my opinion, really close to the same thing or the same thing that are differentiated because of how they're trying to figure out how to sort the data, like Aggro Paladin and Mining Paladin. I think those are going to end up being pretty close to the same thing, but if it's not seeing the Wind Fury card, then it's going to group it in Aggro Paladin and vice versa, things like that. So we'll see. There's a few of these decks that I think are being held down by bad builds. I do think that Control Warrior, Highlander Warrior, some version of long game slow Warrior ends up being fairly strong once a build is figured out and once they know if they need to target Druid or target aggro, because it switched to targeting Druid and getting really greedy, which means it just died to Paladin because it couldn't clear anything. So we'll see how things sort out. I don't, like we talked about a little bit earlier, the mini sets I don't think change as much, and I don't think that they're supposed to change as much. It just feels like we get those 2 or 3 cards that take something that was already good or on the brink of being really good and pushing it really far. Like Ramp Druid is already being played because they had played around with it with Thaddeus doing the fire stuff, and then Ignis and Fizzle, and finding whatever way to break the game because they got to 10 mana on turn 4. And now they have more payoffs for it because it Shattered. It's not a new deck, it's just using what they already had. So some of that gets a little frustrating because you feel like you don't have something new to play with. I think the new Warlock cards are going to be really good for the next year. That 2 mana draw card is just peak Warlock. It feels like it should be a core card once it rotates because it's just what Warlock does, and maybe brings back Zoo next year, but that's getting really hopeful. So that's kind of my take. I think aggro is going to be really strong the next 2 days as things settle in, and then once they make their balance changes. We'll see.
And Thaddeus cannot rotate fast enough. And you do bring up a good point with statistics, because like I did mention, like Ramp Druid and Highlander Warrior have become tier 3 decks, but have they? Statistically, yes, but also statistically, everyone's been playing them. And that means we've had good builds and bad builds, and we've had people that have figured out how to play it and people that haven't had to figure out how to play it, or did not figure out how to play it. So those numbers, even though we've got a lot of statistics, can still be skewed until they get a refined build and get more reps on it and all that. So, so even though things ended up being tier 3, maybe they're not. Maybe they're tier 2. Maybe they're even still tier 1. I guess we'll find out. Doc, how about yourself? What are your thoughts?
Excuse me. Yeah, so like probably not going to be like solved for a couple more days, like Pylet's saying. But with mini sets, especially with it being the last mini set before rotation, I feel like generally this one is the one that has the hardest time of trying to make an impact in the meta it comes out in. I will not be surprised at all if if the cards from the mini set are significantly stronger post rotation, because the card pool is slimmer. You can target things better, and there's less tools to work with. So the tools you do have, you have to rely more on. So I think probably might not be the most significant right now, but as soon as rotation happens, they're probably going to feel a lot stronger than they do today.
And one thing I just realized is I don't think we really have a Yogg, right? There's no card from the mini set that has just overtaken everything. Like, I know I personally hate reflections and all that, but it feels like this one's a lot more. This one has been powerful. It has affected the meta, but there hasn't been like that one card or that 2 card that, I mean, when you make maybe that's why they made Therazine so boring and so unimpactful. I don't know, but I don't know. Do you guys think there's anything like that out there? Because I haven't seen it.
No,
I haven't. The neutrals are pretty tame this mini set. I did generate a Therazane in Arena, so not drafted, generated, and that was really strong because I didn't realize that buffed your hand also. I thought it was only deck, and that makes it a lot better. So I think that Marut Stonebinder, the Highlander, where you discover elementals, summon one, get the other 2. I think that's going to be okay later on. It just doesn't have a greedy deck to go into yet. As soon as we get greedy Highlander decks, where you get a greedy, Highlander Warrior, Highlander Priest that just needs stuff to do, that goes straight into it. And I don't think it's a bad card. I'm interested to see if it gets better with rotation. I don't remember how many elementals are rotating out, but the elemental pool is really big right now. So there is a lot of duds that you can get off of that. So maybe next year at some point we're complaining about that card, but I do feel like they definitely pulled back the neutral power, which I think is good.
Fair enough. Any final thoughts on the meta before we move on? Pylet?
No, like I agree a lot with what Doc said, that I think some of these cards are going to have more of a home in a couple months when rotation happens and they're able to slot into places that those cards are leaving. Like I think it's Quick Pick, the rogue demon hunter weapon that draws a card when you attack. We don't really play that right now because we have enough other weapons, but as soon as Magnifying Glaive and all those draw cards from last year in Demon Hunter rotate, that's just a Demon Hunter card in any deck for the next year that's aggressive because it's strong, it's good, we play that. So I'm interested where those fall, hopefully well.
How about yourself, Doc?
No, I don't have anything that I haven't said already about my thoughts on the current meta.
All right. And I like,
how about yourself, Tito?
I like what you were talking about, the buffing your hand too, because I think that if we have a 5-mana card do nothing, if it also buffed your hand, it'd be a little bit better. Please fix Black Rock and Roll. But I
Black Rock and Roll is the best archetype warrior right now.
Yeah.
By what I'm looking at, it's higher than all the other ones. It's not great, but it's all also mixed up. So
No, I mean it's fun too. That's the deck that I tried to build. I wanted to get those 56 Naga Giants on the bottom again. And it makes it, you always play them and you're like, these big minions, how are they gonna get through wave after wave of big minions? And they find a way. So outside of that, please keep some of the holy cards in the core set, please. Please, Garden's Grace core. Can we do it? Yes, we can. But that was a lot, Doc, but I'm ready for some dessert. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds nice. So Pylet, what is your favorite dessert?
So I am a sucker for pretty much any type of brownie. So
Nice.
Any brownies, that's definitely my go-to. I'm not a big fan of cake and things like that. I just never have been. I don't know, it's just boring. But brownies, I will eat all day. Any of them.
Cake does a great cover of War Pigs, but anyway.
Yeah, so listeners, please leave us a review. It helps us out. It helps us know if we're doing the show how well or not. We also want to have the show be something you want to listen to and it be a show we continue want to make. So any constructive, not suggestive criticism, any constructive criticism, we would gladly take. And if you email the show or leave us a review, or if you leave us a review or an email, goodness, it's been a couple podcasts. Can't you tell? We'll read it out on the show. There you go. Got it in one.
And we also got
It's a Monday, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. And we also got from Pat on Spotify said that we had a great episode guide talking about our MTC episode. Definitely going to check out some of the books we recommended. So fantastic. Thank you for that, Pat. We appreciate it. And we've also had some chatter about some episodes in the Bread and Butter Discord. So if you'd like to get involved in that, just let us know. Just join the Discord. And we'd love to have you. But it's time for some finding out where people on their social medias are. And I know I just made a word salad out of that. But Pylet, where can people find you on the internet?
I can mainly be found lurking in a few different Hearthstone Discords, Coin Concede, Squelch, Bread and Butter, a couple others here and there, Blizzlet. So I have a Twitter, Pylet712. That's Pylet. I don't really check it that much. I just kind of have it so I can follow stuff, but I do have it and open it every now and then, but no promises there.
I think I tweet at you more than you tweet.
Yep.
Doc, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Doc McButt on Twitter, and when I can stream again, you will be able to find me on Twitch at Doc McButt. Tito, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Tito Santana HS. Again, I was going to redefine my schedule again, and again, I just fall into old patterns of just logging in every night and having some fun playing some video games. Pylet, you have any shout outs this week?
First of all, shout out to you two, Doc and Tito, for having me on. It was great. Good time. And then also shout out to our THL team. Tito pulled me into THL last season. Opportunistic pro players, and the name definitely states what we are as we're going into these very stacked lineups in the stacked conference, and sometimes holding our own, sometimes not, like this week where I think both of us who have played are 0-3 and they weren't close. But it's been a good time. We have a good fun team, get along really well, chat about decks, and it's been a good time getting to know them and getting to know that competitive scene a little bit more.
You almost took down McBannerface last week.
I did. It was really close. I still look back at that replay and think that there's a chance that I could have won that one, but it was a really weird play, so I don't think I would have made it either way.
Pylet, thank you so much for being on the show. It's nice to get to talk to you outside of game nights, and just through Discord chat. So thank you. You've been a pleasure. So this week I just want to shout out Cortland, because I don't know, anniversary date of recording. But But yeah, it's been great, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. How about yourself, Tito?
To be clear, I am not forcing Doc to be recording on his anniversary. He, in fact, told me, hey, can we move it from Sunday to Monday? Because we're celebrating our anniversary on Sunday. I said, that's awesome. And he didn't tell me that his actual anniversary was today, because I would have canceled and moved it to Tuesday or something like that. So
she's doing stuff without me right now, too. It's perfectly fine.
But I want to shout out Just a Guy, who is hooking up yet another Hearthstone player with a new rig. If you're looking for a computer, talk to Just a Guy, and if you want me to put you in touch with him, I will. But Master Store Champion, who was on our show a couple weeks ago, his computer, his Walmart computer, acted like a Walmart computer would and died. So he has not been able to stream. And I said, hey, if you want, I could set you up with somebody. And I pointed him at Just a Guy. They were talking, and within about an hour, they had a new system being sent out. I believe it actually belonged to Sage, maybe before he got a new system. So he's getting a nice little deal there, and a great computer, and excited about that. I'm also going to shout out Ben Heastone, who also this month was a first-time Wild Legend player. So we both decided this month, for some reason, was the month to do it, and he did that really well. And also want to shout out the folks at Born to Be Wild, who gave me a shout out. I'm shouting out the shout out to the this is like shout out exception, but they gave me the shout out for hitting Wild Legend, and said some very nice things, and love those guys over there. So yeah, but anyway, guys, I think we're toast. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.